This video is the third in a series about paying for long-term care. Health savings accounts, also known as HSAs, are often overlooked options for paying for long-term care costs. Most of us have heard of a health savings account, but don't understand the important details about these accounts. HSAs were intended to provide a way for Americans to save money for out-of-pocket health care expenses before meeting the deductible of a high-deductible health plan, also known as an HDHP. In fact, an individual or family must have such a plan to open an HSA. HSAs were primarily intended to soften the financial burden of healthcare expenses for high-deductible account holders of all age groups. However, an HSA can be particularly advantageous in paying for long-term care expenses at age 65 or over. First, let's define a high-deductible health plan. Deductibles for these types of plans are higher than typical plans with the intent of containing runaway healthcare costs. The theory is that if consumers pay more out of pocket for their healthcare, they'll be motivated to spend less. In 2021, high-deductible plans that qualified under HSA rules had a minimum annual deductible of $1,400 for singles and $2,700 for families. Many consumers prefer HDHPs because they have cheaper monthly premiums. As a result, the popularity of such policy increased significantly, especially after the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, became law. Yet the downside remains that consumers end up paying more out of pocket. So, to reduce the impact, HSAs were introduced as an attractive way to accumulate money for these expenses. Health savings accounts possess remarkable tax advantages. First, money can be contributed on a pre-tax basis. Next, funds in an account grow tax-free without limit. And finally, withdrawals can pay for qualified healthcare expenses without paying taxes. HSA withdrawals, also known as distributions, are intended to cover qualified medical expenses. Generally, these are the same expenses that can be deducted on an income tax return. However, healthcare expenses paid with HSA funds cannot be used as itemized deductions on a tax return or reimbursed via a flexible spending account. Other details about HSAs are: HSA account holders cannot make new contributions once enrolled in Medicare. Taxes are payable on non-qualified distributions plus a 20% penalty. If an HSA withdrawal is used for purposes other than qualified medical expenses prior to age 65, regular income tax is paid on the funds plus a 20% penalty. However, at age 65 or older, only ordinary income tax is payable. Finally, all HSA withdrawals made during a year must be reported to the IRS. This would be on Form 8889 and filed with that year's tax return. Aside from typical healthcare costs, an HSA can also be used to pay for qualified long-term care expenses and for long-term care insurance premiums. Qualified long-term care expenses arise from prescribed services needed by a chronically ill person who has been determined to have either of the following needs in the past 12 months. First, a person cannot perform without help at least 2 activities for daily living, like dressing, bathing, or toileting, for at least 90 days, or that person needs supervision and protection due to cognitive disability like dementia. These needs could be handled by in-home care or in assisted living, memory care, or skilled nursing settings. For these situations, the IRS defines nursing services in a separate category of HSA-eligible expenses. Nursing services are defined as those typically done by a qualified nurse or attendant. In the case of in-home services, if the nurse also provides help with housework or shopping, these costs are not covered. Only the nurse's fees for time delivering qualified health care can be paid tax-free from the HSA. This includes family members who provide the same services as nurse or attendant. HSA funds can also pay long-term health care insurance premiums with some requirements. When considering buying such a policy, make sure it meets HSA rules. Also, the amount that an HSA account can be used to pay for long-term care insurance premiums depends on the age, with the assumption that the older policyholders pay higher premiums. Overall, the older the person, the more money that can be used from the HSA. As I mentioned earlier, taxes are paid on an HSA withdrawal for non-qualified expenses, plus a 20% penalty fee for those under 65. At age 65, however, the 20% penalty does not apply, and the HSA acts like a regular IRA. The only difference is that there are no required minimum distributions. This provides the account holder with great flexibility as compared to an IRA. One strategy for maximizing the HSA for paying long-term care expenses requires careful planning and execution by doing the following. First, start contributing to the annual HSA maximum at the earliest possible age. This means the dollars grow over the long haul. Second, invest the HSA money in financial instruments focused on long-range growth. Third, through one's employment years, pay for out-of-pocket healthcare expenses without tapping the HSA. And fourth, only withdraw from the HSA to cover long-term care expenses when the time comes. This strategy is aimed at maximizing the amount of money available for long-term care expenses. However, it requires some discipline and sacrifice. Not everyone can afford needed cash outlays for healthcare expenses over the years. However, those who are able to do this can leverage the magic of compounding over an extended time, thereby yielding a significant amount of money for potential long-term care expenses. Another advantage of this strategy is that the HSA account holder can use the money for tax-free, non-healthcare related expenses. The key to this option is to scrupulously save all receipts for healthcare expenses over the years. Since there is no expiration limit on qualified healthcare costs that have not been otherwise deducted or reimbursed, these can be used to justify tax-free withdrawals from the HSA. The resulting cash can be used for any purpose. Health savings accounts can offer many features for consumers in general. These accounts can also have many additional advantages for those planning for potential long-term care costs.